Hello, everybody. This is Steve McKeon.
And this is Lupe Munoz, and this is the Leadership Exchange.
It's great to be back on the podcast with you. I'm really excited about tonight's episode as well. Some of the insights and some of the conversations that we've had over the last couple of years as we've approached this topic in our current roles, and then also some of the experience that we've had over our tenure as we look to build high-performance work teams and a lot of the details that go into that. And tonight we're really going to focus on the importance of training high-performance work teams. And there's a lot of work that a leader needs to understand as they start into this area, because it's not about self-improvement. It really has to be planned activities. There's obviously going to be self-improvement that individuals are going to have to make on the team, but it's really the structure around, again, creating that environment to where folks are going to be successful as you walk them through opportunities to learn, and then also just to have that environment where it's okay for people to share, right? So that's one of the things that you and I have found throughout our careers, is that sometimes people that have a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, are really hesitant to share that knowledge with other team members because they think it devalues them. And it takes some good skills and convincing to kind of change that paradigm, flip that switch, so that they understand that that knowledge that they share with others only promotes their skill set as that subject matter expert. It doesn't take away from them. And that's, I think, a constant barrier that most leaders will face as they start to engage teams and really look to build high-performance work teams. I know you got a great story about one of the tools that we like to use when we're building high-performance work teams.
It's not only the tool, but also just the mindset that you can accomplish a lot if you have the right approach, the right method, and the right tools. Steve, you remember the posters of Rosie the Riveter?
Well, yeah.
You remember? They're the old posters from World War II. It was representing all of the women that were involved with supporting the industry for the United States in support of making everything that the Army or the military, the Air Force, Navy, et cetera, needed to be able to fight the war. If you think about how many able-bodied men had to go to war, it was probably pretty staggering. There's no exact number of how many women went into industry to be welders, riveters, manufacturing jobs that men had prior to that time. It was definitely in the millions and tens of millions. So you think about that challenge. We've got all these people that I would imagine a lot of them had never done anything like that. And then you ask yourself, okay, how are we going to quickly teach them to be able to do these skilled traits, right? It really speaks to the importance of how effective an effective training program and approach is key and can be very effective. So they were able to get people that had no experience, no knowledge, to be very effective and start to produce real product. And it is referred to as training within industry, but it really talks to one of the elements. And some of the things we're going to talk about today is, hey, how do you make your team very effective through training? Because one of the elements, you mentioned some of the elements that we've covered on high performance work teams, Steve. One key element is, having a highly trained team, and a team that is high performing has to have a lot of cross training. So that means that any person could step in and do any of the other jobs at any point, depending on, so there's a lot of flexibility. It's a very nimble team. We're going to talk about some of those elements, but if you're very interested in this, please do look into training within industry, and you'll find some interesting stuff. There's a really cool, an official government video that was used back in the day. And although it's very dated, it's black and white, some of the references to how they thought then, you got to keep that in mind. But the key point of how to instruct someone at a job is pretty powerful. I found it on YouTube. I really liked it. Aside from some of that dated mindset, I'll say, it was a pretty good video. When you think of components of an effective team training program, Steve, what are some of the high-level things that you feel are essential to success?
Well, the first all is, how you're going to transfer that knowledge, right? So we talked about preparing the team in advance, creating the environment, letting folks know that we're going to ask them to teach what they're good at to other individuals with the overall goal of creating more capability amongst the team, right? So there's no single point of failure among that team. And so to do that, one of the things that we've learned through training within industry is 4 key steps. And, the first one is really to prepare the worker, then to present the job, then to try the job out and to follow up on how they're doing with that job. And, it sounds pretty elementary, but I think, Lupe, if you want to kind of break that down a little bit more into each one of those aspects, that would be very good for our listeners.
Let's talk about the actual delivery of training. There's this mindset of, hey, I'm a visual learner, or I'm the type of learner that does by doing things or by reading things in an instruction manual or an operating manual. And in reality, adult learning says that we need all 3 elements. And if you think of, for those people that have some prior military experience, think of how you were trained back when you were in the military, or if you still are, right? The instructor would say, hey, this is what we're going to do. So they'd talk you through it on paper, maybe in a presentation, and then they say, okay, now I'm going to do it. And then they'd show you how to do it. And then they say, okay, you do it. So there's those 3 elements. Training within industry uses that model also because it's very effective. In the military, you've got to be able to be very effective and very good at training people quickly, of all types, all ages, of all backgrounds. The model is around making sure that you have those 3 elements. If you kind of peel that onion back a little bit, that means that you have to have something in writing. So you have to have some standard to train on. Otherwise, you'll have inconsistent training from person to person. I've been part of teams where you have one person teaching their method, right? They believe it's the best. And then you've got another person that think their approach is the best. Well, there can't be 2 best approaches, right, Steve? We both know that. There's only one best way to do it. It could be a combination of those 2 people, the way they do it. But in the end, you have to align and come to some standard that can change with time as you learn, but you have to have something to train as a standard. The phrase that is used is tell, show, do. The tell, show, do method ensures that you're going to be able to retain a lot of what you've been instructed on. I don't remember the percentages, but it was like, hey, you'll remember 10% of everything that you hear, which is maybe the tell, and you will retain, a larger percentage, but not very big percentage of. But when you combine all 3 things, then your retention becomes much, much higher, somewhere in the 70, 80% range or higher, if I recall. It kind of speaks to the impact of using that tell, show, do approach.
Yeah, and when you think about some of the best companies in the world that have the ability to bring people into, as a new individual into a team and have that individual able to perform in a relatively short time, they're relying a lot on this methodology, right? So when you think about Toyota, Danaher, those companies really leverage this methodology to make sure that people understand you're here to learn. Here's our standard that we're working towards, and then the process of the instruction. You just don't throw a piece of paper in front of them and hope that they get it. It's really spending the time to go through that with them, and so that really key elements, I think, to the success of this. And when you think also, Lupe, I'm going to go back and talk just a little bit about some of the things that we spoke about last week in prepping for this episode, is that with high performance work teams, there's a lot of pre-work that's done by the leader. So our role is to first go in and kind of assess which jobs do you need redundancy at, which jobs do you really need to start with first. And so you start by, really looking at the team and conducting the skills assessment. And from that, you're able to start developing kind of the first framework of who actually has those skills already, who doesn't. So it kind of leads into a natural gap assessment that's going to be really critical as well. And then one of the things that you've done, I know Lupe, throughout your career and even recently is, starting to level up, right? The abilities of individuals as they start to stack these different skills on top of them. And that really kind of sets the stage for training based on, clear objectives. So now a team really understands, in order for me to be X level in this job role I have, here's the basic minimum skills I need to have. In order for me to get up to that next level, there's a clear path and it's defined. And so that really helps both the individual, the supervisor, but also the coworkers understand where someone's at on their journey. And you don't get this kind of upset condition where someone thinks maybe that they're at a certain level because of, could be tenure, it could be the fact that they're really thinking that they know a lot more about a specific task or subject than they really do. Having that ability to kind of level set in those environments is really key as well, because it's not always just, new individuals. A lot of times you're coming into an organization, or you're taking on a department or combining departments, and now you got to really assess, hey, what do these teams know? And what do I need them to know? So again, a job of the supervisors really go in and start to build that skills assessment. And then you're going to have to vet it, right? Vet it with the team. And what does that do, Lupe, when we vet that with the team? I know you've done that quite a bit.
I think the biggest thing that does for you is you get that engagement and that ownership. And so people understand that it's not just, like in my case, it's not Lupe's program. It's not Steve's training program, but it's the program that we have as a team. And so there's a lot of level of ownership, a lot of engagement with the program, and feedback and ownership. It really sort of lays the foundation for that continuous improvement feedback loop, continuous improvement mindset as you work on improving. And you're absolutely right, Steve. You got to have that clarity of structure. A lot of times you have these teams that really, it's kind of like, well, it's kind of whenever I feel like you're ready to get promoted, I kind of feel like you're ready. You've been here long enough. You sort of paid your dues approach versus, hey, you've attained a skill set, and we know that we have testing, we have a method of validating that you understand how to operate equipment, and you understand the key pieces of all parts of operating that piece of equipment, or walking through a particular process, right? Whether it's a transactional process in an insurance company, hey, I've demonstrated mastery of that particular job. And I think that a lot of times I've stumbled into teams that have, they just kind of go by time, or they go by, well, they haven't made any big mistakes, so I think they're ready. And it really dilutes the effectiveness of a team when there's no standard to hold up against. I'm going to tell you a small story to talk about another component of training, and that's, selecting your trainer, Steve. I was a production manager at one point for a big bottling operation. The distribution warehouse manager was very familiar to the system that they use, their ERP system. And I was to learn from her. Her name's Angie, I'll say. She knew her stuff inside and out. And I sat down with her to learn how to do certain transactions. And she was going 1,000 miles an hour. And she was so good that she knew all the shortcuts. She was doing keystroke, everything. And she would show me like something very simple. And it was like, click, 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 mouse click, type something. And she was talking me through the whole time. And I was completely lost. I had to stop her and say, well, can you go back? What did you just do? Why did you do that? Why is that important? And she was getting impatient with me. She was like, she's like, look, I'm just trying to show you how to do this. And I said, yeah, I understand that, but you're going too fast. And she's like, well, it's real easy. At that moment, I was like, okay, you're not making me feel good. You're already kind of indicating that I'm not a fast learner. And that might be the case, Steve. But at the time, I realized that she was the most knowledgeable person in the building, but absolutely the worst instructor in the building, because she did not understand the tell, show, do necessity of approaching training that way. she knew the material so fast that for her it was easy, so it should be easy for you, and didn't appreciate that it's not easy for everyone, and everyone needs to learn at a slower pace than you're able to actually do things. And long story short, the last time I got training was after that session. I went to talk to somebody else that I thought maybe didn't know the system as well, but they were incredibly better because they did take their time. They explained something. Okay, look, this is why we're doing this. This is why this is important. Hey, here's a little hint. And then they would walk me through it. And then they would then say, go ahead and do it one time and see if that feels comfortable for you. And that learning experience was incredibly better for me. The message that I'm trying to give with this story is that you've got to realize that your best person at the job isn't necessarily going to be the best person to train others and instruct others, because of the fact that they need to be patient. They need to be good trainers, which is in itself a skill.
Yeah, Lupe, that's a good point. And the other thing with that individual is they could become a great trainer. They could become that great resource. And I think it starts with letting them know in advance what's expected. So I've run across several individuals like that as well. I've kind of shared those stories. And, one of the things that I always do is say, okay, walk me through it again. And especially if it's a behind the screen thing, can you please take a screenshot so I can understand the path that you used to get to produce the product that you just provided? And, once you can kind of get them to understand that process, it really starts to present the material that's going to be needed to present the job to another new individual coming in. And so, there's all kinds of ways to do that. Machine operators seeing the same thing, where someone's just magical. It's almost like their body and the machine is one, and they're pressing all the right buttons and the machine's humming, doing all the things you need to do. And if they can't translate what they're doing to another individual, even though they're the best operator, to your point, they're not going to be effective. So I think as leaders, we've got to identify that, and then we've got to help develop that individual if we think they can become a great trainer, to give them some of the understanding of the training within industry standards and that process around it, so that they know kind of what's going to be expected in that teaching. I think the other thing, as we're talking about training groups, there was a group I worked with in the Philippines a couple of years back. They were very talented, excellent degrees, most of them engineers. A couple of them had, I think one was business degree, another one kind of specialized in human resources. And they were really kind of in a work silo, even though they're one department, close friends outside of work. And so as we started to approach this concept of, hey, we're going to start to teach each other's jobs, there always was this ask, well, why you won't need me if I teach so-and-so how to do my job? They respect me because they know I know how to do that. And so it really, it takes a lot of conversations with individuals to let them know that you're going to be able to go on vacation. You're going to be able to take some time off work when you've got that second person there that knows what you're doing. And by the way, when, work's rarely balanced, a lot of times you get the ebb and flow of, high op tempo, low op tempo. And so it's really nice when it's high to be able to spread that work out a little bit. And when it's low, to be able to pick up some work. So, what you tend to find when you can level load like that is a very happy work team. People are really enjoying, a chance to learn something new. And then when you set that right environment, people really get excited about sharing their knowledge, with someone else in that right sense. And, through that effort, Lupe, I can say that team went from being good at what they did to really being a high performance work team that earned a lot of respect from our customer at the time, because they could just see the growth, and they knew that if one individual was out, there was someone else that they could count on to come in and work with them, help them solve whatever the issue is, or provide the level of support that they needed. And that doesn't happen when people remain just a single subject matter expert in that silo. And I got to tell you, one of the sad stories in that situation was there was one individual that didn't want to share. They didn't want to let other people know what they knew, and they became so miserable in that environment that they kind of worked themselves out of the job, because we needed people that could, when they were gone, because everybody got vacation time or sick time, we needed someone that could come in and backfill for that position, and they could never get over that. And so unfortunately, they ended up leaving the group. But we got even better, though. Once they were gone out of the group, the next person that came in didn't have that same level of expertise. So it took the whole group to kind of learn together and raise this one individual who's going to lead that program to get them up to speed. And so, again, I think when you create that environment as a leader with your high performance work teams, those are the kind of results you're going to get when you start getting people effectively cross-trained and you've really kind of mapped out the right skills training matrix.
Steve, well said. I want to also mention a really great video that I saw a couple years, probably 4 years ago. This video is by a gentleman named Daniel Pink. And the video, and we'll put this in the notes of the podcast as we do for most episodes when we talk about videos or books. It's called Autonomy, Mastery, and Purpose. What the gist of the video is, it's really fascinating. It's got some great facts about studies that were done. But basically it says that people are inspired and people feel job satisfaction the most if they have autonomy, mastery, and purpose. We talked about the importance of purpose, Steve, in a few episodes back, right? Actually, probably at the very beginning of our episode series. But when it comes to autonomy and mastery, that's where this training, the importance of this training ties in, is because autonomy means the team's able to do things on their own. They have everything they need. They have the skills. They have the ability, capabilities. They have the knowledge. They have the training. They have all the information needed, and they have the support from the leader with well-defined roles, etc. But the mastery also. So when team members master something, there's a level of fulfillment that they realize, and a level of value that they get and they perceive the team gets from them as an individual that are part of that team. And so I think it was a fascinating and very eye-opening video for me, and I would highly recommend that people take a look at it, because it really ties into what we're talking about. It's like I had a few listeners reach out and ask for, hey, how do you inspire people? How do you motivate them? This is one way, is you create the environment of providing autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And through training, a great training program, through having a culture where being a teacher and being a mentor is valued as a skill set versus job security for having knowledge, like the example you gave. You want to get away from that, because people need to understand that, hey, look, knowledge is great, but being able to have some of these skills around being a mentor, being an instructor, and being patient and wanting to teach others is really what we want to celebrate and encourage with everyone on our team.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lupe, and a great video. I'll go back. I haven't reviewed that one recently, but you bring up a good, definitely a good video to go back and take a look at. I think there's a couple things we want to touch on before we step out today, and I think the first one is just, how do you measure effectiveness, and when do you stop the cross training, right? Is there, when do you think you've achieved that balance? And the two are really kind of related. And I'll just give you kind of an example I've got in that area is that was doing some work overseas in a lot of different programs. And one of the things that I noted was that there were pockets of excellence out there in the field that if I could find a way to bring folks together, on a quarterly basis, maybe it was a monthly call, we could start to cross share information. But what was missing still was was that information that was shared received, and was someone able to do something with it? And so that kind of really, led me into the need, especially when you're thinking, globally, or multiple sites, multiple departments, of how you can go in and assess and analyze. And I think that's an important part of, building this kind of program. It's one thing to say you're doing cross training, and you've got a skills matrix, and that you've got objectives that team members have. And then it's another thing to really go in and assess, how good do they really know that material? How effective are they? And so when you design that type of review cycle in to the process, it continues to help you evolve, right? And the other thing it does, it can quickly identify, some core strengths and weaknesses within that training of those individuals that, you can start to kind of micro assess and work on, while you've still got the big picture of the larger department or operational cadence of training taking place. And, the other thing that's so important about that is that you're going to have people come into the organization, you're going to have people leave the organization through this whole time. So, the danger also is have someone, like you said, that's that subject matter expert, and all of a sudden they decide that they're going to leave the organization. Did you transfer enough knowledge quick enough? Or are you really starting from ground zero again? And I think as a leader, those are the things that we need to ask ourselves as we're looking for measuring the performance in this area, is that if someone won the lottery today and they're not coming back to work anymore, are we going to be able to operate successfully without them? And that really, I think, will identify, ways that you can go in and start to look at your team skills and capabilities in a way that, really will help balance the need for that cross training. Because again, if you cross train and the individual never uses that material, then it's almost a one and done, and they may or may not be able to perform that area. So, these are some of the things you have to think about as you're looking at developing teams and the performance of these teams.
Absolutely. I'm going to use the other end of this training program that we're talking about. You're absolutely correct. The other thing to think about, though, is, okay, how am I going to measure the effectiveness of our training program? Think of like leading indicators that tell me that if I do those things and I measure them and hold ourselves accountable to delivering on those, then I know that our team's training skill will increase. After doing all that assessment that you talked about, you're gonna identify a development plan basically for every individual, right? Maybe a metric could be, what percentage of all our development plans did we meet 100% for the year? The other potential metrics, I'm just going to throw a few out there that I've seen and I've used myself, is what percentage of our work hours are we investing in training for people? For all the different positions we have, what percentage of strength do we have for each one of those positions? So you could say, like, I have a team of 10 and I have a piece of equipment that I really need the maximum flexibility. Everyone needs to learn how to operate that piece of equipment. So that means that my maximum is 10 at 100%. So if I only have 3 people trained and they've achieved mastery, so now I'm at 30%. And so you can set yourself a metric that says, hey, I want to have at least 80% mastery of our team members on this piece of equipment because it's such a critical piece of equipment. And I'm just giving a small example, but really starting to think of what is it that you need to measure so that you're continuously improving, right? So if I got to my goal this year, do I need to increase it for next year? Or if I failed, what do I need to do to adjust for next year? And so I think that's the other piece of being able to have some measurement to track how we're performing as an organization versus what you were talking about, Steve, which I think is very critical also, which is like, hey, how do we measure each person's development and how they're achieving, some of that training that we need them to do?
Yeah, great points, Lupe. And just kind of closing out on the thought that you just presented is, the sustainability of that training. So, how many reps does a team member need on an annual basis for them to retain that mastery? And so I think that also lends itself to a possible key performance indicator. Definitely lends itself to, the plan that needs to be maintained, because, once you develop that individual, for them to retain those skills really is going to require some good thought around what it takes. And so you can have a measure of, as you mentioned, how many reps do they get in a year, and then measure that in terms of percentage. You need everybody above a 90% in some cases to really retain that mastery. And, 2 or 3 people falling out of that puts the whole team at risk. Great points, Lupe. And, I guess the last thing to kind of talk about is, there's a lot of new technology out there. There's new work environments that we have to work in. And, at the end of the day, I think you can always circle back to this model of training within industry, no matter what that environment is or what the technology is, to really kind of set the stage and the design around how you need to train individuals. And then, let the technology support capturing information details that you need, especially when it comes to some of these critical KPIs. Give me a little bit of thoughts around, working remote or hybrid work environments, and how this can work in those situations as well.
That's becoming more and more of a challenge for companies, right? As they're going to this post-pandemic wave of hybrid work demand by potential employees. And I think that one of the things is, you've got to incorporate technology in a way that maybe you've not thought about. Let's say we have a transactional business of financial, insurance, whatever that may be. You can utilize technology like Teams, like Zoom. You can have them see your screen. You can have them see your face while you're talking to get a little more connection, right? You'll still be able to effectively go through the tell, show, do process. You're just going to have to utilize technology a little bit more. I know video is becoming a more prevalent approach to training people, right? Because you may not be able to do that in front of your computer, but you can show them a video. And you can be there to walk them through any questions they may have, or talk about it after they watch the video, or break it down into small chunks and go over it. But again, still following the, hey, I'm going to tell you what we're going to do, what you're about to see. Okay, the video is going to show you how to do it, and then now I want you to do it. I've got that screen up. I'm seeing your screen virtually. Go ahead and walk through it. And if you have any questions, by all means, ask me. If I see anything that I need to point out for you, I will. But you can still go through all those elements, even though you're physically not in the same place.
Yeah, and that's I love the technology now. I mean, you and I talk about some of the training that we do ourselves, just finding that right YouTube video that can kind of walk us through what we are supposed to do, and then we can go in and try it. And if it works out, great. If not, then we can go back and review that. And so I think those applications, you're absolutely right, are available for everybody, and some of the great technology out there that we can leverage in this space. Hey, this is a great opportunity to just think through the process around training, and really enjoy the conversation here today.
Yeah, it's always a great discussion, Steve, with you. And I hope our listeners really start to think about how critical quality training is, and what does quality training look like, and be able to make use of some of the things that we provided for them. But for now, this is Lupe Munoz.
And I'm Steve McKeon, and thank you. This is the Leadership Exchange.
Everyone have a great day.